10th, Economics, Chapter 2, Sectors of the Indian Economy. Good morning, children. Now let us start the chapter Sectors of the Indian Economy. When we are talking about the sectors of the Indian economy, we should understand first what is an economy. Economy refers to the study of and interactions of different institutions which are engaged in an activity which generates income to the people of a country or the citizens of the country, and that income generated is used by the citizens to fulfill their different types of demands or needs. So now, in order to understand the economy and its sectors in a detailed manner, or in a manner which is going to be fruitful in a practical way, we need to understand as to what do we understand by economic activity. This you have already studied in your previous class, that an activity is considered to be an economic activity when it is done to generate an income. For example, if we are doing an activity for which we are getting an income, that is considered to an economic activity, but there are so many things which we do at home and for that we are not paid. So that is not considered as an economic activity. So simply stating this, that economic activity is an activity that is done for the generation of an income. And we know that each one of us is engaged in economic activity of some sort. Depending upon our capabilities, depending upon the resources that is available to us, depending upon the opportunity that we have got, we all are engaged in one or the other sort of economic activity which helps us in generating an income and which in turn helps us in fulfilling our needs and requirements. So we can say that almost all the citizens of the country are engaged in economic activity, and their involvement in these different types of economic activities leads to the production of goods and services. So because they are producing goods and those goods are having a demand, that is why they are produced, and that is how the economic activity gets momentum or speeds up or has its utility, because everyone cannot produce everything he needs or requires. So he is producing one thing, another person is engaged in some other economic activity, and that is how it keeps on completing the circle or the channel of producing goods which is in surplus or in abundance, and that can be sold to those persons who require it. So what are the different types of economic activities that people are involved in has been discussed upon in this chapter, and here those economic activities will be discussed within inverted comma with the word sectors. So we are going to talk about the sectors of an Indian economy, and these sectors are associated with different economic activities. Now we move on to the sectors of the economic activities. Now we all know that there are three important sectors. One is primary sector, then we are talking about secondary sector, and then the tertiary sector. Now let us first take up the primary sector. Now, as the name suggests, primary sector is associated with the production of primary goods that can be used for the production of second stage of good. So, primary sector is a sector which is in direct association with the natural resources, because the production in this sector takes place by using these natural resources. Let us take, for example, the cotton plant, and this cotton plant depends upon if we are going to start up a cotton mill industry, so that depends upon the natural factors that is available to us: the nature of the soil, the amount of water, the fertility of the soil, the climatic conditions. That all is going to define the cotton that gets produced in a particular region. Same way we move on to the dairy activity or the dairy farming that is being done. It all depends upon the biological process of the animals, and again that is associated with the nature or the natural processing. Then we move down to mineral and ores, that again refers to the exploiting of the natural resources that has got accumulated over the years in different regions of the country or in different parts of the world. So in conclusion, what we have come up the conclusion that we have drawn is this, that a primary sector is a sector which is directly associated with the natural resources that is available to it for the production of its goods. Okay, so that is why we call this primary sector as the agriculture sector or the related sectors. Related because it is also associated with dairy activity, minerals and ores. They all are the part of the primary sector. Now we move on to another sector and this sector is called as the secondary sector. Now, when we are talking about secondary sector, what it means that the goods that are produced by the primary sector, those goods are now transformed into the finished goods. So the natural resources that have been used in the agriculture sector for the production of crop, for example cotton, it goes into the industry, and there we, the yarn is, we spin the yarn and then we weave the cloth, so that gets transformed into the finished goods. That is a different types of cloth that is available in the market. So transformation of natural products into finished goods, that becomes the function of the secondary sector. It is done through different technology that is available to us. It depends upon country to country, or it varies from country to country. There are countries which are more into labor intensive modes of production because their population is higher, at higher level, so they can use those resources which is available to them. There are countries which are more technologically advanced, so they can use capital intensive modes of production where machine made goods are more into functioning. So there could be different modes or ways of manufacturing, but the basic thing remains the same, that all these countries, whether they are producing the goods by using machines, or they are producing the goods that is by human labor or human resources, so the ratio, it varies, but the amalgamation of both the two is essential. And the ratio or the amalgamation of the two leads to the transformation of the goods that are being provided through the agriculture sector as raw material to the secondary sector or the industrial sector, which leads to the production of the final goods or the finished goods. So this becomes the activity of the secondary sector, because industries are involved into it, factories are there, so that is why referred to as the industrial sector. So we all see here that cotton is a primary good that is being produced in the agriculture sector, and then we have to go and we spin the yarn, and then the cloth is being produced. So that is the fine finished goods that we are now going to use it for our consumption or for our utility. So now we move on to another and that is referred to as the tertiary sector. Now when we talk about the tertiary sector, it is a sector where services are being provided. That is why it is also known as the service sector. Now it helps in the development of both the primary sector and the secondary sector. How does it do? In an agriculture sector, for example, if the farmer are needing irrigation facilities, if the farmers need fertilizers, various kind of machines also, which could be tools, we can say, which farmers need, so that is to be transported to the villages, and that is being done through the development of roads, railways, transportation system. So that is facilitating agriculture sector. Moreover, when the goods are produced through the agriculture sector, that is the crops are generated, then these crops need to be transported to different industries where and in whichever amount they are required. So here again comes in the tertiary sector. So that is why tertiary sector is important for the development of both the primary and the secondary sector, that is the agriculture and the industrial sector. So it aids and it supports the production process that happens in our country. Not only in the transportation, it helps us in the storing of goods that are being produced in abundance. Storing, for example, farmers, they are having warehouses and godowns in which the surplus produce is being stored, and when it is needed or required, then it is being transported from the production centers to the place where it is required. So that is all being done with the help of the tertiary sector. Apart from this, if the farmers, they require money, finances to invest in the capital which they will use in order to buy machines so that they can modernize agriculture crop production, that also becomes a part of the tertiary sector. So this way we can say that tertiary sector is important for the development of both the agriculture sector and the secondary sector, or primary sector and the secondary sector. There is one important statement which you will very much agree with, is this, that economic activities are interdependent. Now all these economic activities, whether we talk about the primary sector, secondary sector or the tertiary sector, they all are interdependent. Without the existence of a primary sector, secondary sector cannot flourish and grow, because they need the raw materials. And if we keep on importing these raw materials, then what is going to happen? Most of our money will be diverted to buying the goods from the foreign countries, and that in the longer run might weaken our economy. So it is very much essential that our primary sector or the agriculture sector is developed and is able to provide us the needed raw materials so that we become self-sufficient. So that way the role of primary sector is very much important, and these primary sector, the goods that they are producing, if they are not transformed, if they are not converted to finished goods, they will not be used in that raw form and probably might get wasted. So in that reference, secondary sector becomes all the more important. And third, that is the tertiary sector. The transportation of goods from the primary to the secondary sector is done by the involvement of the tertiary sector. So this way all the three sectors are interdependent. Now we are going to move down to the next topic, where we are going to compare the three sectors. Now when we are comparing the three sectors, we try to analyze which sector is more important in the initial phase, and how the growth of different sectors helps us in classifying the different countries of the world as a developed country, developing country, or an underdeveloped nation of the world. So we all know that different production activities are going on in our economy or our country, and different countries are involved into different types of production activities, as I told you, and those production activities are determined by the demand of goods and services of the consumer. Depending upon the demand that a consumer shows or has, the production activities of that country gets decided. So this is first important thing that talks about the production activities or the nature of the production activities that is happening in different countries of the world. Now second, what has been observed or seen is this, that in the initial stage of development, agriculture sector predominates, and as the country advances towards developing country and the developed nation of the world, then what happens? It is the secondary sector and the tertiary sector that starts predominating. So the transition phase from primary sector to secondary sector and then to the tertiary sector speaks about the growth of an economy, the development in an economy that is taking place. So we'll see that in the developed nations of the world, agriculture sector is prospering. It is highly mechanized. Less number of people are involved in agriculture sector. It is contributing much to the GDP because they are able to produce good amount of crops, and that is why they are providing good quality, ample and sufficient raw material for the secondary sector to flourish. And because more goods are getting produced and they are getting manufactured, and so if they are manufactured in surplus amount, apart from meeting the requirement of their own citizens, they are having it in abundance, of which they can use it for exporting to different countries of the world. So depending upon the cost of production that they are incurring, they can determine the price of the product, and also depends upon the demand of the product, of their product in the foreign market. So that is going to give them a business and generate an income for the country, and that is how these different countries prosper. Okay, so this is one thing when we are going to compare about these three sectors, and how growth of these three sectors helps us in classifying the countries into a developing country or an underdeveloped country or a developed nation. Now, another important thing that comes to our mind, that when we are comparing these sectors, so we have to compare on what? On quantitative basis, that is how much of goods and services that is being produced in these different sectors. So now when we are going to talk about the goods and services that is being produced in a different sector, that is in primary sector, how many goods are getting produced, or in secondary sector how many goods, and in service sector what is the service that is provided. So it becomes very difficult to count the number of goods. Okay, so what as an economist we do is that we try to measure the value of goods and services that is getting produced. So what is the value of wheat that is getting produced? What is the value of biscuits that is getting produced when it is manufactured in the secondary sector? And what is its value become when it is getting transported finally to the shopkeeper who sells it to the consumer? So you see many things are happening in that process when the goods are getting finally ready and is being delivered to the consumer for its consumption. So here comes the difficulty of counting the value or measuring the value of goods and services. So what the economists have derived is this, that we have to take into consideration the final value of goods and services that is getting produced. Let us have an example here. For example, we know that we are getting produced wheat in the agriculture sector. This wheat has to be, we go to the mill and there we transform this wheat into a flour. Now, this flour is been required by different industries for the production of different types of commodities. Let us say that we are here talking about the production of biscuit. So now the biscuit industry requires flour, it requires sugar, it requires oil, and then it produces this biscuit. So this is the value of probably, let us say, wheat, and the amount of flour we can add it into the value of wheat, that is, let us say rupees 1, 8 plus 1, then 4, then 2, that gives us rupees 15. That is the final good value. So what we are doing is this, that we are not taking the value of different products at different levels, because if this value of wheat is included in the value of flour, so the value of flour becomes 8 plus 1, that is 9. The value of sugar is rupees 4, but when we are going to talk about the biscuit, it includes the value of wheat plus 4 plus sugar and the oil. So you can see that amount of flour that is used in making a packet of biscuit is just rupees 1, but because it is not actually 1, because the value of wheat is also counted into it, so 8 plus 1, 9. So why? Because flour, some activity has happened to transform this wheat into flour, so the cost has increased. So that is why we increase it by rupees 1, and rupees 8 plus 1, then 4, then 2, that gives us the value of biscuit, that is rupees 15. So when we are calculating the value of goods and services that is being produced, that is being used in the production of the final good, that gives us the final cost of the product, and that is being counted when we are finding the GDP of the country. So the total value of goods and services that is produced in a country in a given financial year determines the value of GDP of our country. So here we are talking about the final good value, not the intermediate good value. So this is being done in order to avoid double counting. So if we keep on counting thrice the value of a product, then probably it might inflate our GDP and will not give the real national income or real value of the goods that is getting produced in our country. So inflated amount will get generated, which will actually not give us the clear picture of the rate of growth of our economy. So that is why these strategies are adopted when we are counting the value of goods and services. So you have to remember this, that we are counting the final value of goods and services that is getting produced in a country. Now, when we are talking about the final value of goods and services that is produced or that is counted, that gives us the gross domestic product or the GDP. Now, this gross domestic product that is being formulated upon, that is being done by the central government. The central government takes this initiative in order to estimate the value of GDP or the value of national income, because it gives us an idea as to the rate at which our economy is growing or progressing. Now we move down towards another section that talks about the historical change in the sectors. Now this is something which has been oft repeated, that in the initial stage of development, it is the primary sector which is very important, because people are largely not that much educated. People are very much confined to their given piece of land, and they are producing crops which is not only fulfilling their requirement but the requirement of the people in and around their village. So this is the initial stage of development, and that is why primary sector becomes very much important. Then with the development of the society, with the coming in of the money, what happens? There happens a transformation in the agriculture sector. Agriculture sector starts getting developing. So many associated activities related to agriculture starts happening. So when all these starts happening, then it leads to increase in the crop that is getting produced. That is much more than the amount that is required. If it is meeting the requirement of the producer and also meeting the requirement of the people living in and around the surrounding areas, and even after that some surplus amount is left, then that surplus amount is used gets transported to the far off places, and then it initiates this buying and selling activities. Okay, so then when these buying and selling activities starts getting initializing or taking place, then it leads to the beginning of new methods of manufacturing units that get set up. There are factories which start setting up. They start using these raw materials which they get from agriculture sector, and new varieties of crops gets produced, and that is how the shift happens from primary sector to the secondary sector, because now this secondary sector is adding a value to the crop or that gets produced from the agriculture sector, and different varieties of goods that gets produced, or transformation of the goods takes place, or raw materials takes place into wide variety of finished goods catering to the tastes of the individual consumers or customers. So that adds value to the crop that is being generated through the agriculture sector and gives rise to an importance to the this secondary sector. So now what we have seen that in last 100 or India pre-colonial pre-colonial India was largely agrarian. It was producing crops that could meet only their basic requirements, but after independence India had to develop a strong industrial base. So we will see that how over last 100 years there has happened a shift towards the manufacturing sector and largely towards the service sector. Because these service sectors have become indispensable, and they have played a very important role in the transformation of the society by connecting the agriculture sector, that is the primary sector, with the industrial sector. So that is why role of the tertiary sector is increasing with every passing day. So here we will understand the rising importance of the tertiary sector in production. Now what we will see here is this, that from 1973 to 74, production in the tertiary sector has largely increased, and we are saying why 1973-74, it is largely because it was after Green Revolution, when production started happening in a large scale, when mechanization of agriculture started happening in a large scale, that led towards an increase of the tertiary sector. Okay, so what started happening was this, that goods that was produced in villages, they started getting transported to the cities and towns, and the connecting point became the tertiary sector. It started emerging as the largest producing sector of the state or the country, and there were many requirement that people associated with the expansion of the agriculture sector and also the expansion of the secondary sector. So there were large as we were also increasing in population, so the requirement of the services owing to this large population also became demanding, and there was increase in income that started coming up because of the expansion of the agriculture sector, because of the growth of the secondary sector or the manufacturing sector. So with the growth that was happening, that growth generated more of an income, more of a livelihood, so demands also started getting generated, that further increased the role of the service sector or the rate of growth of the service sector. Apart from this, new services like information technology, communication technology started getting developed, which affected the production activities that was happening in our country. So this also paved way for an increased growth or importance that was being given to the tertiary sector. Apart from this, with education and health issues started coming up because of this much of huge population, then it started generating more of an employment opportunities also to the people of the country. So tertiary sector off and on started engulfing the whole of the economy, because it became the sole source of connecting the agriculture sector and the primary sector. It became an important parameter through which the increased demand that got generated with the improvement in the living conditions of the citizens was getting fulfilled. So that all paved a way or gave importance or a fillip to the growth of the tertiary sector, and hence it started becoming very important for the economy. Now we talk about where are most of the people employed. Now this is something which is very important also, and here you have to understand a bit, because there is an ironical statement which states that agriculture sector generates more of an employment, means it is actually giving employment to large number of people when we compare it with the in tertiary sector, but tertiary sector is contributing more to our GDP. Now this is what I've written here, that increase of tertiary sector contribution in GDP but not in employment. So this is something where the economists have to think over, that this is a sector which is contributing to the GDP, but it is not generating much of an employment. Why? Because for getting employment in the tertiary sector, you need to be educated, and India is still a country which is not that much not having that much of practical knowledge or practical education. So that way, the employment generation capability of tertiary sector is becoming limited or is getting limited. Another important thing, that primary sector continues to be the largest employer. Like, if people are not getting employment anywhere, they have got their piece of land and they start doing farming on their piece of land, and they appear to be employed. Remember, we talked about disguised unemployment or underemployment. So this is how it appears that actually people are employed, but then it has got its fallacies also. And because not enough job is getting created in the primary sector, in the secondary sector, that is why most of the people are going are trying to associate themselves with the tertiary sector. So that is also giving a fillip, like wherever, if in some of the departments of the tertiary sector people gets accommodated, they are getting employment and they're contributing to the GDP. Rest of them, if they are not able to get an employment, they start working in construction sites and other things. So that kind of disguised unemployment or underemployment exists in urban areas also. It's not that it exists only in the rural areas. So this is the problem that we are facing at this point, that service sector is contributing much to our GDP, but it is not generating enough of employment. Still large number of people are dependent for employment opportunities on the agriculture sector. Now, another important point, that production in the service sector rose by 14 times, but employment only 5 times. This is what we have been telling. And what we see here is that in the agriculture sector, it was, when we talk about the production, it was 1/4 of GDP. Contribution of agriculture sector in GDP was just 1/4. But employment generation, it was more than half. Then for secondary and tertiary sector, it contributed 4/5 of the produce to GDP, but it was less than half in employment generation. So both are contradictory. One is generating employment and one is generating, it is contributing much to the GDP. And in our country, both of it are important, because if there is no employment, if people are not getting income, they will get income only when they get a job. If they are not going to get an income, obviously they are not going to demand the goods that is getting produced. If there is not going to be demand, then production will come to a standstill. And when production is going to come to a standstill, then we count the output is going to be zero, or output is going to decline. So the total value of goods and services that gets produced in our country, we all know, is the value of our GDP. So the value of GDP will also start declining. So everything is interrelated in our country. So we have to balance the two, so that people are also getting employment and the service sector is also getting a fillip. It is growing so that it is contributing to our GDP. So this whole system is going to create that virtuous cycle. Now, more than required people engaged in agriculture sector, that is leading to different kinds of unemployment. Now here, different types of unemployment that is existing in our agriculture sector. One is what is called as disguised unemployment. Now here in your book, they have said that underemployment is a kind of disguised unemployment, because people are working on a given piece of land, and even if you remove them, they are not affecting, their removal is not going to affect the output that is getting produced. So they are disguisedly unemployed. They appear to be employed, but actually they are not. But actually the difference between the two is just a thin line. Now let me explain to you how underemployment is different from disguised unemployment. When we are talking about underemployment, we are talking about the labor effort in an agriculture sector that one is giving. For example, if on a piece of a land only 3 persons can produce 200 quintals of wheat, but 5 persons are required, or 5 persons are working, then in that situation, 2 persons, or rather say all the 5 persons, are not putting in that much of labor effort that they are capable of, because their responsibility is lessened. In that situation, we can say that all the 5 persons are underemployed, because all the 5 farmers are not putting in their 100%. Because they know that if they are not going to do this, this is going to be done by him or Z person. So that way we can say that everyone is underemployed. But how we correlate it with disguised unemployment? So now we say that 5 persons are working, and out of those 5 persons, if we remove 2 persons, then even those 3 persons that are engaged, they are able to generate 200 quintals of wheat. So in total, we can say that 2 persons were disguisedly unemployed. But actually, when all five were working, everyone was not giving out their full potential. So that is basically underemployment. You are not working as per your capability. In the same, for we talk about in the urban sector, for example, if you are highly qualified and you are not getting the job of your as per your qualification, and you are forced to earn some kind of livelihood in order to live or survive, so you are working into a job that is much below your potential, where your actual potential is not getting optimally utilized. So that way you are underemployed. So these kind of situations not only exist in rural areas, but it exists in urban areas also. But in your book they have labeled this underemployment as disguised unemployment. Now we move on to another important segment, that how to create this more employment opportunities in a country. Now, in order to create more employment opportunities in a country, we need to have this government support. The government should come and give support to the poor farmers and facilitate them to retain their areas of job. Then another is that if a farmer is engaged into agriculture activities, more of an irrigation facility should be provided. There should be construction of dams, etc., so that water is getting available to the farmers in sufficient amount, and they are not dependent on rainfall for their crop production. Then it helps the farmers if they are producing surplus amount that gets transported to the market, so that productive employment to different groups of the people is getting generated, and moreover the crop that is getting produced is not getting wasted. Then credit facilities should be given by different regional rural banks that gets developed, or agriculture development banks that gets developed by the government in the village area, where farmers can get loans in order to meet the requirements of various raw materials or other kind of inputs that they require in order to increase the production and productivity of their land. Apart from this, there should be small industries that can develop in the rural areas or semi-rural areas, like mills and all, that could help in easy transportation of these crops to the industries, where they can produce the finished goods, and this way farmers or the villagers can also get employment in the industries, and that is going also to solve the problem of migration and the problem of disguised unemployment that exists in the rural areas. Apart from this, there should be warehouses or cold storage facilities that should be given to the farmers, so that they can store their surplus crops. Then processing of industries means the crops that is getting produced, for processing those crops, specific types of industries need to be set up. Or rather we can say that if farmers of our country are producing a genre or a specific type of crop, depending upon the demand that gets generated for those crops, so likewise those types of industries should be established which can process those crops that is getting produced, and hence should make available to the consumers in a finished way the goods that they require. So then we move on to the 60% of the population in our country. They are in between 5 to 29 years age group, and that is why the government needs to generate more of schools and other teachers and other staffs who are going to help the students get education. So even at present we can say that 20% of the jobs that can still be created in the education sector. That is the prediction that has come from Niti Aayog or Planning Commission. Then there can be a possibility of the development of the health sector that will also generate employment opportunities. There should be different state and regional developmental programs that could be associated by the state governments, depending upon the kind of agriculture or crops that is getting produced in their state, and so that they can determine which kind of small scale industries that could be produced, which would meet the requirement of their farmers. The crop that they are producing, that would also generate income to them. So these ways small special economic zones have been set up, so that would facilitate an economic activity and would generate employment opportunities in those regions. So it has to be a regional approach also towards employment generation, and moreover central approach towards employment generation as well. Now we move on to another important thing that has been done by the government of our country, and that is related with the law or the right to work. So central government, it has come up with this concept of right to work program that was initiated under Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, that got formed in the year 2005. So earlier it got started in only 625 districts when it was initiated in the year 2005, but later on that is from the year 2014 it got extended to the total number of districts that exist in our country, that is 720. So what was the objective of this program? This program guaranteed 100 days of employment in a given year to the people residing in the rural areas, and it guaranteed them 100 days of employment, and if they're not given the employment, then they will be given unemployment compensations or allowances. It was first proposed in the year 1991 and by P.V. Narasimha Rao, and it started getting applicable to all the districts by 2008. Okay, and culminated down to actually getting practically implemented by the year 2014. So this program has been considered as a very important program. It has got a stunning results it has given. So it is a very strong example of a rural development initiative that has been taken by the government of India. And World Development Report in the year 2014, when it got actually executed to almost all the districts of our country, literally praised this program and said that this program not only generates employment opportunities, but it also emphasizes on infrastructure development of the nation. So it is very effective and very good program to generate employment opportunities in the rural areas of our country. Now we move on to another important topic of this chapter, that is division of sectors as organized sector and an unorganized sector. Now when we talk about organized sector and unorganized sector, the name suggests that a sector which has got proper rules and regulations, proper policy, everything is clear, everything is direct, everything is spelled out, so that is basically considered to be an organized sector. Unorganized sector जिसमें जो unorganized हो, जहाँ पे कोई rules and regulations नहीं हो, there has to be no universal policy for all the employees. Every policy varies from person to person, salary varies from person to person, so there is no fixed duration of work, there is no fixed salary, this job is not assured, job is not permanent, so that becomes an unorganized sector. So this is basically the technical kind of the points that people take into consideration when they classify the sectors into unorganized and organized sector. So let us go through the difference. We all know there is an example of two person that in your book, one is Kanta and another is Kamal. Kanta is working in an organized sector and Kamal is working in unorganized sector, and because she works in organized sector, she has got certain advantages, that she has got the employment is regular in nature, all the laws that she is being governed or the workers of an organized sector are governed by, they are the government laws like Factories Act. We have got Minimum Wages Act, like all the employees should be given minimum amount of wage that has come from the government. So that goes through a formal processing. Everyone enjoys the security of employment, that your employment is permanent. People don't have this fear that next day probably I would be asked to leave. So that kind of insecurity does not exist. The working hours are also fixed. Apart from all these benefits, they also get certain paid leave, provident fund, gratuity, medical expenses, pensions, and also they all are a part and parcel of the organized sector. If we come to unorganized sector, here the nature of employment is irregular, it is scattered, and it is not within the control of the government. The laws are not spelled out clearly, there is no job security, people are having flexible working hours, and they don't get benefits like pension, gratuity, paid leaves, etc. So all these kind of things are not being made available to the persons working in an unorganized sector. So there is no ease of mind if you're working in an unorganized sector. But then if we take into consideration the disadvantage is this, that in our country, because if a person is working in a government institution, he feels secure that his job would never be taken away from him, so he kind of become or shows a lackadaisical attitude. He does not do his work properly, and that actually affects the government sector. So there has to be a check on that particular aspect also, so that the economy keeps on functioning smoothly, because ultimately it is going to affect the growth and development process that takes place in our country. Now we move on to another segment that talks about how we are going to protect our workers who are working in an unorganized sector. So when we talk about these workers, they have got their own problems. So largely the persons who are working in an unorganized sector, largely if we talk about in the rural areas, it is the landless, agricultural farmers, weavers, blacksmith, and in the urban areas, the workers who are there in the small industry, who are working at construction site, who are working at trade and transport areas. That is the economic group who are working in an organized sector. If we talk about social groups, we are having SCs, STs, and OBCs who are working in an unorganized sector when we talk of both rural and urban areas. Now, so when we talk about the workers who are working in an unorganized sector, so the government is coming up with labor laws, and it is making even the private institutions or an organization to give them the permit to function if they are having certain humane labor laws. So these kind of policy formulation has started to come up from the government as well. If the economy needs that smooth kind of functioning, because if large number of people are associated with the unorganized sector, and if they are not getting jobs, if they are not getting security, probably their output gets affected. And this lately is not only realized by the governments, but even the private personnel, they also realize it. And moreover, there are lot many competitions. Retention of their employees also one of the biggest competition that the private institutions are facing. If you are good at work, everyone is going to retain you. If you are giving a quality output, everyone would want to have you. So that also creates a kind of competition. Moreover, if there is lot of switching over from one company, then a person would not like to join that company, because probably the person would start thinking that if a worker is switching over from that company regularly, then probably the working environments are not congenial, so he would not like to go into that company, because apart from the salary, there are lot many other things people would think of before joining an institution. It is not only the salary that matters, it is the environment that we are working into. It is a kind of respect that we are getting, how far it is away from my place, whether there are transportation facilities available or not. Because all these things becomes important when we are largely associated with unorganized sector, because that becomes our decision to leave the job. But in a government sector, you become assured that probably yes, that is going to be a permanent area of functioning. So probably you can think of how to develop yourself in various other infrastructure requirement that you probably might be needing when you are joining those government institutions. So this way both varies, and also and this kind of thinking also creates a kind of competition, not only for the workers who are working in the private or unorganized sector, but also to the employees who are employing or hiring the workers in their organization. So these days we all see that unorganized sector, the companies and all, they have tried to organize themselves by formulating certain principles, certain policies, and adhering to it and following it. So they are not now considered to be less safer than the government institutions, and people are shifting to this unorganized sector also. So that kind of mindset has to get developed, and that will pave the way for protecting the workers who are working in an unorganized sector. Now we come on to the last section of this chapter, that is sectors in terms of ownership, public and private sectors. So largely public sectors, we say that these are the sectors which are largely owned by the government, and an example becomes railways, and the objective of this public sector is social welfare, and the cost of services that gets provided by these public sectors, they are reasonable cost. And there are certain government supportive activities that facilitates the person who are a part and parcel of this public institution, and there are various other social welfare programs also. When we talk about the private sector, it is largely the individual ownership, like Tisco and this Reliance India Limited. And then we talk about the objective of this private sector is profit motive, and because they have to actually cover up their cost of production, therefore the cost of price for the services that they're providing is comparatively higher when we compare it with the public sector. They don't show any kind of responsibility that they probably have towards their workers or an employees, and there are no other social welfare schemes or facilities that gets provided by these private sectors. But then, because we see that unorganized sector is trying to cover up its demerits by becoming more assured in terms of the services that probably it is promising to provide to its employees. In the same manner, they are now coming up with various corporate social responsibility schemes. They are coming up with certain facilities that they provide within their working campuses, so that the worker who is working in their institution feels secure. So these kind of transformation that is taking place in the private sector, which had made, which was actually their limitation, is helping them overcome their problems of securing or retaining their employees. So both of them are now, even now the public sector is coming up with the questions as to why an employee is not performing. It is trying to devise now a standardization programs or scheme, so that they can judge the performance tests are getting devised by even the government institutions to judge the performance of an employees and give them a warning that if you're not performing better, probably you can think over, because we need output, we need a kind of activity which is going to help us generate more income and make us stay in the market. So this way, both the private and the public sector, and organized and unorganized sector, are working hand in hand together, taking the advantages from the other sector and trying to strengthen their institution. Thank you.